Okay, let's move on to the next little section here. These elements down here are giving us much kind of slower, almost like a cello-like pad sounds, courtesy of the Basal oscillator from Volt, and lots of reverb. So let's give it a listen. So I had to keep the VCA quite low on that one because the plateau here is set to such a long decay, and it's mostly wet, that if I were to have the VCA any higher, that signal just hangs in the air for so long it builds on itself, and it kind of peaks. It gets way too loud. So this VCA is kind of just taming it down a little bit before it goes into the plateau. In general, Basal is really nice. If we do, let's turn wet all the way down, and we can just listen to it without the reverb. So without the modulation up at all, it's typically a very smooth oscillator. So really just beautiful sound. And mod adds a little tooth. It's a really nice sound. Ooh. So even though I turn this off so that it's still hanging around inside the plateau with this decay. There we go. So even though nothing's been coming in for several seconds, but it's still, that tail of the decay is still hanging around. So that's why I have to be careful with VCA. So it's a pretty simple sound, the way that we're changing the VOC. So again, with this ADDR sequencer, this time you could see it's a much slower clock. So this is coming from clock 3, which is a divided by 16, whereas this first element that we were looking at is times 4, and you can just see at a glance right there the difference in speed for those. And so this is slowly moving through these elements. You can see so I just noticed actually, so let's just go through here. So 0 volts, that's C, 0.5. 0.5 is actually F sharp, but then C minor does not include F sharp in that scale. So let's see. Actually, let me get rid of that for a second. And let's just do... There we go. Okay, so I can select number 3. So 0.5 is coming into the quantizer, but what's coming out is 0.583, which is a G, because this F sharp is not part of the scale, so it's just shoving it into the closest note that fits into that scale. So I did that twice, actually. So that's C again, that's good. So that's F, which is fine. So F sharp again right there, C, C. Right, so they're also in step 6. Let me get to that. There we go. So 0.5 goes into quantizer, but then 0.583 comes out. So I'm kind of being very conscious of writing these voltage values manually. So do I really need the quantizer? Maybe not. You know, I put it in there, not really knowing what I plan to do with this sequencer. Like maybe I was going to do some more sort of random thing. So it's fine. You know, at a glance, you can see what's going to be coming out of it, and if it sounds good, then that's fine. Just be aware of that. If you did have a quantizer after a sequencer, and you're kind of trying to do a very manual thing here. Just be aware that the settings, the values you put on this dial may not actually make it to your oscillator, right? Depending on what the quantizer is set to. So let's just, whatever. Doesn't really matter at this point, but let's just go ahead and make that the voltage value for a G. And, okay, let's do that. A little bit too loud. Okay. And like everything else, this is going into this mixer. It's going into the delay. It's going into this final reverb again. So I wanted to add, its own reverb down here because I knew I wanted it to be such a thick, huge, long reverb. But for everything else, especially with this very quick sequence, that the reverb needs to be much lighter, or else it would just be muddy. So feel free to add multiple delays, multiple reverbs. The only thing to keep in mind maybe is processing power. If we go up to engine and performance meters, we can see at the bottom here how much CPU is being used by each module. So reverb typically is one of the heaviest things that you can do in VCV rack. So 2 point something, it's not huge, but you wouldn't want to use like 20 reverbs around the whole thing. You could end up just crashing everything. So the Trummer's close to 2 also. Right, so this reverb is using a little bit more because it's the decay time. The longer it is, the more CPU you're going to use. So it's fine, but something to be in mind of also. So usually I would just keep these off once in a while. I can check it if I was having a little performance problem. Okay.